Scott.
We're live.
Good. Okay, we're ready to rock and roll now that we have our chair. And I have my coffee.
Do you want me to start or do you want to go?
Yeah, no, I think we're ready to go. Welcome, Senate Economic Development on April 27th. And we are addressing VSAC's, the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation's concerns about the amendment that we got from Senate Health and Welfare on the healthcare sections of our Workforce Development Bill H703. And so Tom and Marilyn, if you would be kind enough to anchor us in the sections you want to talk about, and let's chat about them.
Okay, for the record, Tom Little, Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. We sent around to the leadership of this committee and the Health and Welfare Committee on Saturday last some comments on the red-lined draft that the Health and Welfare Committee generated late last week.
Right.
And some of our
got them both in front of us.
Okay.
So
some of our comments stem from the ongoing challenge of distinguishing between loan forgiveness programs and loan repayment programs.
right.
And it's easy for that distinction to sometimes, in the details at least, get missed or lost. So that's just maybe a little bit of a refresher that an example where that can happen is a provision for wanting to know the students, the participants' academic progress. That makes sense for a loan forgiveness program where you're making a loan to someone who's still in school or in a training program. But if the participant is now in the workforce, it generally doesn't make sense to have a GPA requirement. Likewise, if we're talking about a loan forgiveness program where we're making a loan, it makes sense to have the language focus on the loan that's being made, which in these sections would be a loan being made by VSAC, and therefore you wouldn't need a broad definition of the term loan. On the other hand, if we're talking about a loan repayment program, the participants may have loans from a variety of sources, primarily, most likely, from the federal government. And then those sections, you need a definition of loan.
Right.
There's another point that we've made in here in at least one place, and that is the maximum amount of the benefit. And I would defer to Marilyn Cargill from VSAC on that. That, I think, surfaces in the first comment on the first page of our memo. Marilyn, can you give some background about that?
So you're talking, Tom, I just want to make sure I'm talking about the right point. You're looking at forgivable loan, that definition of what that means.
Okay. Does it make sense to walk through section by section, or because
yes,
for us this is a little bit all over the place?
Sure. So if we look at the document that Health and Senate Health and Welfare created,
Draft 2.1.
And
Yeah,
you, right, look at section 34, oh, I don't know if it's section 23, Vermont Nursing Forgivable Loan Incentive Program. So let's
Right.
start right there.
right.
So under number 4, it is defining forgivable loan means a loan awarded under this section covering tuition, room, board, and the cost of books and supplies up to full-time attendance at an eligible school. What we are questioning is that could imply that what you are offering students is 100% of their costs being covered by this forgivable loan. Up till now, most of these programs have covered tuition. So we are trying to make sure that we are clear and that it's clear to students what this program can actually cover.
And why, may I just ask, why wouldn't you want to cover all their costs that are incurred for them to be there?
The only reason that we're raising this is how much it will change the number of students that you could potentially work with in a given year. So if the, and I don't have my numbers right in front of me, so I apologize, but if the cost at UVM for tuition is roughly 16,000, but the cost for tuition fees, room, board, books, supplies is closer to 40, then you're going to help the students you help, you'll help completely, and then you only help half as many students as you otherwise might have.
So your concern is this will limit the number of people we'll be able to serve.
Correct. And I think certainly we have had, as you know, we have over 100 students since we started this program. I think there's 164 students who are participating in the program the way it's currently structured. So making it a much larger scholarship doesn't seem necessary in order to meet the goals of the program. So we just want to make sure we're understanding, for the most part, what it was you wanted to accomplish here, and suggest that you might not need to cover all of the costs. You might want to put a may in there or something so that it allows VSAC to set the maximum award. And we do that in consultation with the Department of Health.
So presently you have a program that does this just for tuition?
So yes, the program originally was, and I don't want to make this too confusing, but originally the program covered $6,000. For this year we're about to go into, the Department of Health and VSAC determined for this coming 22-23 year that it would cover full tuition at public institutions, not to exceed that. So students at our Vermont State College system or students at UVM would have 100% of tuition covered, and students who were attending out-of-state schools that might be more expensive, or Norwich, which also has nursing programs, would receive up to the UVM tuition figure.
So do you have the money at VSAC to do this absent this legislation?
Right now we do, because last year, the money for 21-22 and 22-23 were awarded to us, appropriated to us in the last year's budget. This year, this nursing program only has $100,000 in it. So that was just a placeholder, according to Representative Fagan, to make sure there was money still being allocated to the program, but the $1 million was actually allocated last year.
So who made the decision to go to $16,000 from $6,000?
That decision was made by VSAC and the Department of Health, and it was made because of in part because of the critical occupation scholarships that are being offered that are covering full tuition for nurses at the Vermont State College system. So we had two programs that were really out of balance with each other.
Yeah,
They
so,
serve the same populations, just going to different schools, right? Nursing schools, one at the state colleges and one at.
You could actually have two students at the state colleges because they ran out of critical occupation money. So one student might have gotten the whole tuition covered in a critical occupation scholarship for nursing, and another student might have received $6,000 from this program with a work obligation. And we wanted to bring those two programs at least into some financial parity, that the benefit of the programs was similar.
So what we probably want to do is, per your suggestion, with only $100,000 added, is to leave the program as is. If we wanted to expand it to double the size of the help, because you're talking about room and board and books and fees and stuff like that, then you would need more money, right?
If you wanted to help the same number of students, that is exactly right, Senator.
Are we oversubscribed at this point? Are you turning down people?
We are not at this point, again, because the critical occupation scholarship is still in place. If that program were to end, if that is going to be sunset, then I think we'll need to come back and talk to the committees about funding for this program.
okay, but at the moment, you have enough money for the program. We want to make it consistent with what you're currently doing, which is why you're asking us to take off everything but tuition. Right? Which is,
Correct.
yeah. And is that true, or adding a may means a loan awarded under the section may cover? Is that another option?
Right, absolutely.
Because going forward, one could conceivably understand that a student might have been given a full scholarship, but had to pay for room, board, and books, and couldn't afford those.
Provided you also insert language authorizing who is going to set that maximum award level every year. One of the things to keep in mind is that these programs tend to achieve their desired and intended results much better if they are funded appropriately and allowed to run for a series of years without interruptions and disruptions, so that the students coming through the middle and high schools learn about them and learn to rely on them and trust that they're going to be there for them.
Okay.
How much more would you need to cover the full ball of wax here in upcoming fiscal year?
We would want to go back, Chair and Sirotkin, and recalculate that for you, but I think we'd probably be talking about maybe tripling the program, and that's not assuming that critical occupations would be sunset and we'd have more students we were trying to cover. I think just to cover the full cost of education, you would probably need to maybe 2.5, 3 times the funding.
What's the funding?
Yeah, what's the funding now? We have 100,000 in here to add to what you currently have.
Again, our funding is $1,035,000 is what's currently in the program each year.
And so you have at the moment 2.7.
Right now we have some small amount of carry forward from fiscal year 22, with the year that's just ending, and we'll add that to the 1.035 million, which will give us our program for this coming 22-23 year.
Okay, so where, if the 1.35 billion is in this bill, where is it?
The 1.35 million is not in this bill. It was actually funded in the budget. Well, I don't know if I should say it was the budget bill. It was funded in 21-22 legislative session, gave us 2 years of nursing incentive loan money, $1,035,000 each for 21-22 and 22-23.
So when someone comes to you in a nurse, wants to enroll in a nursing school, other than the fact that they want to go to that school, what are the criteria for eligibility for this loan?
Sure. So what they do is they fill out what we call a unified scholarship application. They must submit an essay and a letter of recommendation. They must demonstrate financial need, and they must have a grade point average of 2.5 or higher. Those are all of the requirements right now. They can be attending an in-state or an out-of-state nursing program, with preference given to students who are attending in-state programs.
So this is current.
So how do they, if they have to maintain an average, what if they're going into the first year of school?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
An initial applicant for going into nursing school, you're saying they have to have a 2.5 average. Where do they get that average from if they have to
So if they are a high school student who's starting the program in their freshman year of college, it is their high school transcript. If they are in college, it is the transcript from the prior year that must be a 2.5 for them to continue in the program or to apply for the program.
Because that had been in the comments on this email chain, that had been Ruth's concern is that. So okay, this is very helpful. So did you talk about all this with the healthcare committee? Why are, we had sort of hoped that all these pieces were going to be ironed out in the healthcare committee. So it's a little concerned, it's a little frustrating that we're still back here changing things. Did you guys just not get a full to discuss this?
Yeah, I think probably there was, again, that confusion we keep talking about between loan forgiveness and loan repayment, which is how, for example, you end up with A6 defining what a loan is, which for this program doesn't make sense. The only loan that can be forgiven in this program is the loan that is being made under this program. So that definition could be struck. It has nothing to do with this bill.
So I understand your requests for the loan program are to make consistent the loan itself. So the loan forgiveness needs to be consistent with the loan that has been given.
Right.
And so those are your requests in the first section A4, sections D, all this language on the first 2 pages of Tom's memo are all to bring the loan forgiveness into streamlined with the loan itself. Is that correct?
That is certainly part of it for sure. I think probably one thing that might be helpful is to understand we did not see this language before we testified, and we did not see this language. Tom, do you remember when we received this?
It seems like you're a forgotten child over at VSAC. They don't consult with you in terms of whether they're going to give you a program,
This is what
whether it should be there, whether it's going to be amended.
I think we're in the last 2.5 weeks of the session, and that explains a fair amount about this. There is, I think, a policy or a substantive issue that Senator Clarkson, you mentioned that was raised in the email correspondence over the weekend by Senator Hardy.
Right, she has concerns about the GPA stuff.
Right, and the VSAC corollary or response to that concern is using in the statutory language the term good standing may have some advantages in terms of access for students, but some disadvantages in how you administer the program, how you explain it to students, and how the definition of good standing may vary from school to school.
Okay, and actually, I'm a bearer of simple brain at this point in the session. My understanding is these requests are to align with what the loan program is in the first place. So you don't want to be asked to forgive something that you haven't actually granted. You've given a loan under one set of expectations, and the loan forgiveness needs to complement it. That's my understanding.
Right. Further, if we were asked to work with legislative council on a markup of these sections,
Could you do that?
we'd be happy to do that. I don't want to
Rosa
in on that.
Who's working with David Hall on this, and I actually think just given the time that it will take us to go through this, I am, and I'm speaking just for myself, and there are three other members of the committee here, but given our time frame where we are, and given our assumption that you had done this with health and welfare and aligned all your needs and interests in health and welfare, I think it would be great if we aligned if you did that work with Rosa and brought this into complementary form so that the forgiveness program reflects the loan program in the first place. Keisha.
I have no qualms with that. I wanted to ask like a content question before we
Go for it.
let them do that work. I'm just curious. I just want to make sure I understand that whatever money we're appropriating is going to students in Vermont who stay in Vermont. I don't know if.
I thought that's what and non-travelers. Is that correct? I mean, that's our assumption here, is that.
So a couple of things. The student can be a resident or non-resident, the way this bill is currently written. They can attend a Vermont school or an out-of-state school, with preference given to students who attend Vermont schools. And they need all to have agreed to work in Vermont for 1 year for each year that they receive the funding.
Right. So what is your average number of years that students receive forgiveness or a loan? Is that based on the loan or the forgiveness program?
It is based on the number of times they apply for this funding. So this program, as it's currently structured, has been running since the spring of 2020. So this is a fairly new program. I'm sorry, the spring of 21. This is a fairly new program. The older program that we were running that had slightly different qualifications, I will have to go back and get for you what that average is. I don't know that off the top of my head.
So
Yeah.
how many students currently are you funding in-state versus out-of-state, and where are they out of state? Are they in New England? Are they anywhere they want?
Just give me 1 second and I will put something up that will help us.
Even if they're from out of state, I mean, we want them to stay in state. So I mean,
No, I'm not. I don't. When I said students going to school in state, I don't mean they have to be Vermont residents. I'm
Right.
just curious.
I hope we're not helping non-Vermont residents go to out-of-state schools.
no, but Vermont residents might be going to out of state
That's
schools,
right.
and then the assumption is they come back and work here. Isn't that right, Marilyn and Tom?
They have to.
Yeah, they have to for as long as they take advantage of this loan forgiveness
I
program.
just want to know the mix.
I think the vice chair's suggestion that you work with legislative council and a member from health and welfare, if you can, to get on the same page here. If we have to decide the issue of good standing versus grade point average, which I understand to be the only issue that I saw as still an issue, then we'll make that decision. But I think we don't have the time, if we're going to defer to them, and they didn't talk to you, and you may raise some good points, we should make those points with health and welfare and come back quickly to us. And I agree with Tom that it is the issue of the end of the session that's causing a lot of this. I do have one question before I turn to Senator Brock, is if nursing is such a problem, I think I would be in favor, and 16,000 is tuition at UVM, and there's another 16,000 of cost of going to nursing school. I think I would be in favor of putting more money and paying the full freight for these people if we're so concerned with nursing, because 16,000 could still be a real impediment to people signing up. I realize that it would dilute the program. We don't put any more money in it. But I'm not sure I want to, if it's such a crisis, that I want to keep a barrier out there for people who have limited means who want to go to school in nursing. Isn't that the whole purpose of what this bill is about?
So a thought on that would be if you are a student of limited means, Vermont residents are going to be receiving federal Pell Grants, Vermont state grants, institutional aid, as well as this scholarship that covers their tuition. So there are other sources of assistance for these students. This is not trying, well, I shouldn't say it's not. This program does not need to cover all of the costs in order for a student's funding to be fully met.
Okay, that's fair. I think at this point, with the understanding that you and Rosa work together on this, I think that we need to make sure that our forgiveness program is aligned with the loan program itself. I get that. And we would want to make those consistent. That makes sense. And with that in mind, and I think that's what most of your comments are about, are they not?
I think that's fair, yes.
Okay, so if that's the understanding, I would urge, Scott will connect you both in terms of emails and so that we can coordinate this.
Senator Brock has a question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to wind up this up.
Sorry, it's amazing how when one's eyes are here, one's eyes fail to go here.
To me, this is not an academic scholarship program. This is a program to fill jobs that we critically need, which are nurses. And from my perspective, I don't care if they go to school on the dark side of the moon and they're from Moldova. The key is, do they agree to work as nurses in Vermont for the requisite period of time? And that we add language that defines what we mean by work or what we mean not by work. And what we don't mean by work is working as a traveling nurse.
Right.
As a recipient of those funds during the period of time, so that they could work in Vermont as a nurse, but not as a traveling nurse. And that needs a definition, which I think we can work with lead counsel and work that you're doing to narrow this down to make sure that it has that specificity. Does that make sense?
And that has been critically important to us, and we were assured by AHEC that they do not finance anyone who is being a traveling nurse.
But it doesn't say so in any of the bill language that we've seen.
Yeah, we'll address that. The out-of-state school piece is also important. Remember that we have evidence that Vermont residents who want to go to nursing school have not been able to get a spot in the Vermont schools and are in a sense forced to go out of state,
Right.
even if they don't want to.
Right, and that's because of our barrier with the number of nursing faculty, and we're hoping to address that barrier in this bill.
Right.
With increases for it and incentives so that we'll build our nursing faculty. But I think this whole committee underscores Senator Brock's position here, that we do not want to be funding the beast that is gutting our hospitals of operating capital.
I certainly agree with that, and I agree that the promise to come back to work is of critical importance. I'm not sure I agree, and I don't know what you're doing presently. If there's somebody who lives in California, wants this Vermont money, takes the money, goes to school in California, promises to come back to work in Vermont and doesn't, and rolls the dice as to whether it's ever going to be collected back from them in a forgivable loan. And in the meantime, that money's out the door that could have
Yeah.
went to somebody with closer ties to Vermont.
So we certainly could create the program so that it is a Vermont resident who attends school in state or out of state, or any out of state student attending a Vermont nursing
Right.
program.
I think it needs that definite, yes.
That would put Senator Brock and myself potentially at odds, but I want to know what you do presently. You get applications from somebody out of state who go into an out of state school and wants Vermont money?
This year, this legislation that we are discussing right now is the first time that out of state nursing students are eligible. They have not been eligible in the past.
I agree that out-of-state nursing, well, that going to an out-of-state school is fine because we can't even accommodate in our nursing schools. But I'm not sure I agree that an out-of-state
I think
student going to
Well-
an out-of-state school to get all this money and then us forgiving it at the collection process is enough to.
I would add that in a circumstance like that, I would view the collection process, the forgiving of that loan to be a last step, not a first step. In other words, structured in such a way that they deliver on their promise before it's forgiven.
Right.
It can be forgiven, it could be interest-free during that period of time, but in the event that they then fail, it becomes a loan that's collectible. I think the one thing is we don't have the capacity to train the students that we need in state.
Right.
We
No.
don't seem
No, we're
to
acknowledging.
have the number of students who are going to out-of-state institutions. It's a question of whether we have enough there. Certainly, if you did something, such as what I'm just suggesting, and I'm throwing it out for discussion for the committee, boy, you talk about publicity and free press. Much as we did on the remote worker program, it would be controversial, no question about it. But boy, it would open the pool up a lot more than the pool is open right now.
So out-of-staters,
That's what I said. As somebody who lives on the dark side of the moon, who goes to nursing school in Moldova,
right,
if you agree, once you're certified, to work in Vermont for X number of years, year for year, we will forgive that loan that was given to you to go to school. Now, is there a potential collectability issue? Well, again, just as you grant any loan, you get enough information about the person.
It's not just the collectability in my mind. It's also floating the money for 4 years that might go to a Vermont resident. And if this thing is oversubscribed.
If it's oversubscribed, you can give preference to Vermonters as a first step. Certainly, I would do that. In terms of how you grant preferences. But if you have this money and you don't get enough Vermont residents, and you don't get enough
Maybe we
Vermont
can write it that way. I don't know how the process
but
goes.
I think you have a notion of what our concern is. It's the same concern you have. We need more nurses, and how do we get them? And marrying our relocating worker program with this is maybe not a bad idea.
So let's.
Can we move
on?
we need to move on, I'm afraid. But if Rosa's right here, she can wave. So there's Rosa, and Scott's connecting you. If we could see a draft back tomorrow, or today at some point, or as soon as possible, that would be great. Because we're hoping to have a whole rewrite of this bill soon.
And if you wouldn't mind, I just want to answer Senator Ram's question. 98 nursing students are currently getting the scholarship for this year. 18 of them are attending out-of-state institutions.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Senators, we will get right on this. We want to help you adjourn in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think this is great. We can move this forward. And if you need anything, you know where to find us today.
Go holler.
Right,
Thank
Rosa?
you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom and Marilyn.
Thank you.
Okay.
Helpful. Sort of. I mean, so much for delegating. Okay, great. So Christine, welcome back.
Thank you.
And all
I'm,
your additional support team.
Yes. So anyway, right now I get my host disabled attendee screen sharing on my message. So I wonder if maybe we can
It's
give
been
me
fixed.
permission to share. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Thanks so much. Got it.
Scott is a whiz. So we're going to shift from nursing to broadband. And we're going to go back to your presentation of yesterday. And which we apologize, is the way of the world at the end of session. And when we only have another 50 minutes, 45 minutes really, to address what you're hoping we will add to this bill. So, Christine, you walked through this presentation in record time. Very impressed. And where would you like to take it? We'd look to clarify the ask and where you see adding it to what's already in this bill, because we see there are a couple places we could add and include broadband workers. But this is your win-win pay it forward idea.
Yes. Yeah. So so I'll kind of hit some of the high points on the slides and give you plenty of time to ask questions. But I do want to reintroduce the folks that have been helping us with this. As we got into how do we attract 216 additional fiber technicians?
Sorry,
we got right
216.
216. Yep. We got right into that issue that you're all facing. You talked about it here. Is the idea that the demographics of our country is aging, and we've got people dropping out of the workforce. So we got to get everybody working, and we've got to get and try to be as competitive as possible. So I heard your previous discussion. I think that's kind of what we're talking about nursing, and it's the same problem affects cross sector. It's affecting all industries, of course. Go ahead. Just feel free to interrupt.
I think we would love to get to your ask and how we can help.
Yep. All right. But I just want to say that that's how we came across social finance. So I'll kind of make sure we talked about the worker shortage. We're trying to get 64,000 households connected. I won't go to the CUDs. We talked about that. We're focusing on the access to labor. Talked about the challenge. We need 216 workers. We also need to get more electrical line workers, and that's a 4-year apprenticeship program. So this is a long-term investment. Just the point is we've been working with the VCB, Social Finance, the Vermont Community Foundation, Communication Workers of America. We kind of tapped everybody we could to address this issue. But I want to make sure you understand the concept behind this. The concept behind this is, as you look at trying to get people to move from lower income jobs, they can't afford to lose their income. So what we're talking about here is providing everything that's needed to attract a person to move into these other jobs, which could be, nursing. It could be other fields such as construction and diesel maintenance and all those things, or electric vehicle maintenance. But the point is, what we learned is we really have to make it so people can move. So people at low income, they can't necessarily give up their income. So we're talking about an earn to learn, pay it forward program. The idea is provide all the wraparound services, identify a company and work with a company to have a position for that person going through the training to move to immediately when they finish their training. So there's no hiccup in their income. And there's a certain cost component of that. So what you do is when that person moves into that higher paying job, they and their employer pay a portion of that back over time. And that's an agreement we make with their employer and the employee, so that now that funding goes back into the pool to train others. So you end up with 2 to 3 times more students served for every dollar, and you create a much more competitive program. And I should add too that this isn't just training for a fiber technician. This is training for a new career. So, we've been working with VEIC to say, what's the career path for folks? People can move from this fiber technician job into electrical line worker, which, by the way, averages $111,000 a year in Vermont, or other fields. So that's, we talk about creating a highly competitive program to attract people from other states. It kind of ties in with what you were just talking about with VSAC. The idea is we have a program that few other states have. Some do, and I'll get to that. But anyway, that's the essence of the program. So before I talk about the legislation, I also want to give my peers at Social Finance. Do you have anything to add to this before we take questions about the program?
Thanks, Christine. I mean, the two things I would just highlight.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. Mike Silvestri, Director at Social Finance. And just by way of background, we are a national impact finance and advisory nonprofit. So among other things, we work with folks like Christine around the country to stand up these pay it forward funds. And so one point I just wanted to highlight that Christine already mentioned is this notion that this isn't necessarily doing something new. It's taking the existing workforce efforts, existing workforce dollars, and stretching them 2 to 3 times this far. So this is a way of doing more with less. And then the second thing just wanted to mention is that what we're trying to do in Vermont is innovative, but there's actually a track record of these kinds of funds around the country. So we've been developing these types of pay it forward funds in close to a dozen different jurisdictions, including Ohio, New Jersey, Florida, Texas, Colorado. And so we are super excited to bring this to Vermont and think there's a ton of potential through a pay it forward fund to actually incentivize some of the cross-sector collaboration that's necessary to create these careers for individuals. So just want to highlight those 2 points and also thank the rest of my team that's joining me here today.
And Mike, if I may, can you send us the information of the track record in those states, how long they've been in place, how many workers they've trained, and how successful that capital reinvestment is, the capital recycling is, for the size of those.
Yeah, we'd be happy to follow up with that.
Yeah, and just to add too, the other incentive for this program is, once we develop a cross-sector program, which in your latest language of the bill, I was reading that, you're talking about, and I heard you yesterday talking to the administration about having an innovative workforce administrator leading this program. The idea, and so it's hitting on the exact subject that you were talking about in terms of cross-sector. Collectively, if we can come up with $10 million for a program, the Social Finance has philanthropists that will match an additional $2 million. So not only do you extend the training dollars, you actually get philanthropy to help as well. Mike or Sandra, if you want to say a few more words about that.
Well, I guess that's an additional question, Christine, for Mike, which is, it would be interesting to know what the initial investment was in these programs around at the different states.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So we target minimum $10 million for each jurisdiction. So in New Jersey, there's an appropriation from the governor's office for 10 million. Ohio, similar. Colorado, we're looking at a similar fund size. We also recently announced a pay it forward fund in partnership with Google. So in that case, we were helping administer a fund of about $100 million. So the fund sizes vary. The sources vary in terms of public dollars, philanthropic dollars, but again, we're looking at minimum 10 million. And as Christine mentioned, if we can reach that target, then that allows us, Social Finance, to unlock $2 million of philanthropic capital that we have that will help cover all the overhead costs involved in administering a fund like this. So in essence,
yeah, I'll hit the language because you have more than $10 million in a collective program. So there's at least 15 millions in related sectors. I've got these related sectors, but let's get to the language. The language is simply to include a requirement that this Office of Workforce Innovation to include a feasibility study, which you've already addressed in the language, but included that to assess creating a recyclable and outcome-based funding mechanism to deploy training, funding, and upskilling of individual strategic sectors. So the point here is this is not directed at the VCBB. This is directed at how do we build a cross-sector program that incorporates these concepts. We have funding within the VCBB to provide fiber optic training. In fact, we have 2 trainings that have been filled already, and we're training 12 at a time. But when you talk about 216, I'm afraid we're just not going to be able to fill all those classes. That's why we need to build a much more attractive program. And the point being, this program applies to all professions, across the board of all professions, not just the VCBB. By ourselves, we wouldn't be able to support such a program. But if we look at it as part of this Office of Workforce Innovation, then it becomes that's really what we're asking, is that we look at this as a statewide solution.
Right, and at the moment, as you know, all that money that's appropriated in this bill goes to all these little silos. It would take a coordinated office like the Office of Workforce Innovation to actually look at it holistically and manage it, that 10 million holistically, for us to be able to actually, to say we're, right now it's so, all that money is very patchwork and couldn't be viewed as a whole $10 million. It's more than 10 million. We're looking at
You got the point. That's exactly where I'm going with this. So the idea is you've already got the money in the collective bill. We can provide language, we can go back and work on specific language, but you've got the gist of the language. The idea being, let's make sure when we do these evaluations and assessments, we include this pay it forward, earn to learn concept with wraparound services, because ultimately, it does get a greater return for that investment dollar on training.
So you're basically recommending that we incorporate pay it forward as a model for almost every one of these investments. That it could affect a whole range of job sectors as we move to upskill people and create careers for people. It is.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not suggesting that it be mandated at this point. You're saying as criteria for receiving money under this bill, you work collaboratively with this office and look at this as one potential plan to recycle money, so we don't use all this one-time money and then find ourselves a year from now with no money for workforce anymore.
That was a better way of putting it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the way that any of these funds always begins is with some sort of feasibility assessment, right? Understanding what are the jobs, how much do they pay, what's the volume of postings in a given year, who are the employers. And so, as with any state, we would expect that step one would just be to have these different, currently siloed efforts, at least undertake some coordinated collaborative feasibility assessment about whether the funds could actually be deployed through a pay it forward model, as opposed to a one and done traditional grant funding model.
Yeah, it's all sinking in. Keisha, you have a question?
I don't see that this is that different than programs that we have in place. They're just in small pockets. So I'm seeing the only difference being that this could be combined with other funds from employers to base it and a larger pot of money so that it generates, enough clawback for administrative costs to be shared. We do have programs that exist like this in the state. And I saw your map, but I'm wondering how this uniquely has made workforce efforts more successful in states where you're already operating. What are the difference in outcomes that we would expect from, what you all do versus trying to in-house coordinate more and centralize how we distribute forgivable loans or help people get access to the workforce and then repay based on their income?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. So I think a couple ways to answer it. One is just going back to the point about multiplying dollars, right? So with the added recycling component, you can take the same budget and serve 2 to 3 times as many people. And we are seeing that across all the deals that we're underwriting across different jurisdictions. So that, number one is a way to achieve greater impact with the same budget. Number two is the way that we structure the underlying deals, the underlying investments and training providers. We do it to incentivize skin in the game. So we will typically provide working capital to the training provider at a portion of what the total price is to offer per student. So if it costs $10,000 to train one individual, we'd give them, say, a portion of that up front. The rest of that they have to earn on the back end as students are successfully placed into jobs. So it's from those repayments, it's from the recycling of capital that training providers are far more incentivized to actually get good graduation rates, get good job placement rates, good starting salaries. So we hope that this overall model will actually create a workforce system where incentives are more aligned and we're incentivizing based on performance.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
How do you work with people with addiction or who are coming out of incarcerated settings, or like make sure that people don't get halfway through and then have a big loan that is overwhelming for them when they're struggling with co-occurring issues?
Yeah. One of the best parts of structuring these deals is actually talking to training providers who are amazing at recruiting individuals from the toughest backgrounds. Just had a phone call yesterday with a training provider that takes ex-felons, folks with former criminal records, trains them up for commercial truck driving programs in a matter of 45 days. And being able to talk to them and see the robust wraparound support services that they offer, everything from access to a social worker, emergency aid, food and nutrition assistance, transit passes, childcare, you name it, is honestly very inspiring. And we try to bake in all those wraparound supports in addition to the actual financing anytime we do one of these deals.
Yeah, an additional point too is that if somebody doesn't make it through the program, they don't have to pay back. We're not going to burden people who fail the program with loan costs, because that would, they're already struggling.
Right.
So people don't have to pay it back? I think I'm confused now.
People do pay it, but as they earn, they pay it back.
So if they don't earn, they don't pay anything back?
If they take all the training and complete the training, but decide not to take an effective diploma, they don't have to pay any money back.
Yeah, I mean, typically students are highly incentivized to complete the program. If they complete the program and aren't fortunate to find a gainfully employed job, then if they're not above that minimum salary threshold, they're off the hook. They don't owe anything.
So it's only if they achieve a minimum salary level after completing the training that there's a requirement to pay something back?
Exactly. Yep. And in some of our partnerships, we have employers paying back on behalf of the student. So it's not even a foregone conclusion that the student would be repaying.
Can we look at a specific?
Yeah, that's what we found out.
Based on the numbers in this proposal, in which there's a $12,000 amount that's going per student. How does that get paid back? Over what period of time? Is there an interest rate involved, et cetera? Can somebody perhaps take us through an example?
Yeah, happy to. And again, it totally depends on the training program, right? How long the program is, how costly it is. But just to use sort of rough ballpark numbers, when we structure these, we try to make the terms as student-friendly as possible. Social finance, we're a nonprofit. We pride ourselves in creating some of the most student-friendly workforce financings out there. So typically what it looks like is a student who gets a job above a minimum salary threshold, let's say $40,000, would pay over a term anywhere between 3 to 5 years. During that term, if they ceased to be above that minimum income threshold, they'd be off the hook to repay. But for as long as they're getting that salary, they're making payments. How much are those payments? Typically, it's either a kind of within a salary band, or it's based on a percent of their earnings. That percent could be somewhere between 5 to 10% tops. And again, it's really for that fixed period of time between 3 to 5 years. And it's up to a maximum payment cap. So if I'm an individual who is lucky enough to get placed into a really high paying job right out of the gate, I'm sort of maxing out my monthly payments, I will hit that cap sooner rather than later. And at that point, I'm off the hook as well. So again, there's a bunch of different parameters that we've put in place to make this as student friendly as possible, to eliminate downside risk for students and really to eliminate the upside risk as well. Because we don't want to create a deal that's at all exploitative. What we're trying to do is align incentives. So that's typically how we structure it.
I think this is really something worth looking at, and given that that's essentially all you're asking is for us to look at it and mandate that it be looked at if we can get past the bigger hurdle of the Office of Workforce Innovator, or even if we don't, maybe we can assign it to somebody else. But I think it's worth exploring, and we're under a lot of time pressures right now. So at least from one person's perspective, I think you've achieved your goal of trying to put some attention towards something different finally, in terms of, as opposed to, if you look at this bill, there's a lot of just pots of money, as you say, one and done. I mean, we do have requirements that people work in Vermont for a while, and that's good, but it's not getting, I'm a big believer in largesse being matched by the people who are taking the largesse from the state. So whether it's the employer, whether it's the employee, when we're helping them out, they can pay it forward. So that's what this is. So I don't think we need to spend a lot more time on this right now.
No, but to move it forward, because our next witnesses are here, to move it forward, would you, I don't know who is the language maven or I don't know what, maven, anyway, who is the language person who's going to work with Rosa to develop this language, or do we want, Rosa, can you take this proposed language and play with it? Okay, I think we will trust Rosa to develop the language for this, for us to add to this and to build on the proposal. I mean, this is a classic example of why we need an Office of Workforce Innovation, in my humble opinion. Right. Thank you. And
yeah, it will provide Stan Mason.
Sorry, what?
As well, if Rosa wants to reach out to Stan, Stan Mason from our office will help as well, develop the language with Rosa.
Okay, if you could get that to Scott, Rosa will, Scott will coordinate Christine, you and Rosa, and then we can get language developed, and we'll get this language to you, and we can move forward. Maybe we can see that later today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. This was exciting.
Yep, thank you as well.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I know.
Okay, we're going to shift 180 degrees to work to after work.
Still workforce.
It's still workforce, but it's a different time of the day. So just to finish on this, Rosa, if you'd be kind enough, Scott, if you could coordinate Rosa and get this proposal to Rosa, so you have it, because they do have some proposed language, and connect with Christina. Thank you, Rosa. Thanks for making the time. I appreciate it. Is Tucker coming in to join us here?
I have not asked him again.
Okay. I'm not sure. You.
Who?
Tucker.
Without Tucker, as soon as he can get here, the better.
Yeah, if Tucker is able to join us, I think it would be great. Yeah. Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So, Senator Westman, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Please help set the stage for us.
So Rich Wesley, for the record, Senator from Whale. I do have a number of bills on your wall, but I wanted specifically today to talk about one of the issues in 730, which Jeremy Elliott has been numerous times the head of the Distillers Association in Vermont, is the owner of Smugglers Notch Distillery. And particularly the issue of in 730 about, I I know the Commissioner Knight came in and I thought I would
Oh, do some,
um,
show and tell.
show and tell just like hers. But Jeremy and many of the distillers are looking is have their low alcohol content cocktails in a can. I, on the way home last night, went through and stopped and here's your champagne in a can.
God, everyone in France would just turn over.
It's brewed champagne in a can. Here's your rosé wine, which is this is 10 or 11% in a can.
That's amazing. I've not found any of those on my lawn.
If you go down the road, you'll probably find some. You know, we're working on the bottle bill in natural resources. Yeah, so we're working on it. And there are very much what in 730 they're trying to do is in some respects mimic what happened with beer in 2008 and 2009 when you created the differential. And there is a differential when you go over 7% to 18, there is a category and it's taxed at a higher rate than those under. This I think is envisioned for this particular can was 4.5% alcohol. So there's a myriad of products out there in the world, hard iced tea, hard lemonade, on numerous ones. This would put the local distillers in a position that they would be in the same position that all of the other products that are out there on the market. And you're going to hear from people because shelf space is an important area, and who gets space on a shelf. And others that already have that distinction don't want competition of other products on the shelf. I would mostly say those products are products that are made outside of Vermont. And for me, it's very nice having a distillery within my community that helps draw tourists, that it's a really good business. Jeremy's place has 5 or 6 people now working there that are good jobs in the area, and tourists love it. And why, as a next step, we wouldn't treat our local distillers in exactly the same way as we treat many other products that are on the shelf. You know, for me, I would be supportive of that, and I wanted to say that, and I'll let Jeremy speak after me. I told the boys they each get a few minutes because I was allotted a half an hour and I thought I'd fit them in. The second piece, I have a bill on your wall, 216. Really, and Dan Schneider is from Stowe Cider, and the issue for them is we really regulate alcohol, beer or malt, Venus beverages, spirits, and fortified wines. And what happens with cider is they really end up in a no man's land, someplace and this is my lay terms, someplace between wine and beer. People drink them in cans more like beer in the cider, but it has the attributes of more like wine. So they end up in a no man's land.
You're talking about spiked cider.
I'm talking about spiked cider.
British cider.
Yeah, and Stowe Cider, it's most of their products. Most of them, I think, and Dan can speak to this, they have multiple products that they offer, mostly under 7%. So, and I think what they would like to be taxed is at the beer rate under 7% because they come in cans more like a beer in that. And this creates a definition in law. There are whole issues for them because they get treated like wine. If you end up at a festival or any place where there might be tastings, they get treated like wine when the product is consumed more like a beer.
Right.
So we're
Pulling up
looking
your
to
bill.
create a definition for them that represents it. The Cider Association has come together. They, people in the cider business have all agreed. And so 216 is specifically towards that.
And what's the difference between taxation? Remind me.
So if you are under 7%, you are at 26.5 cents. If you are over that, you are at 55 cents a gallon.
That's right.
And
So
it
it's-
tracks exactly the way beer is.
Right.
So, and
So the request is just to be tracked and taxed like beer.
well, on that side, but also change, a definition change that would allow them at festivals to be treated, in more of a way that you could have they could have their tastings very much in the same way that we do with other products.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Senator Balance,
Okay.
and I'm gonna
Can
let,
I ask you a question, Senator? before-
sure.
Because I don't know if they've grown out of your district, but I want to make sure that Eden is a part of your coalition because they have the ice cider and sort of other
Yeah.
things. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think these guys do both. I'm gonna let Jeremy go first.
Okay.
You get 5 minutes because we got 15 before we have to run to it.
Sure. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you.
So, introduce yourself, and then I have a couple of really basic questions that I need to just be totally clear on.
Sure. Yes, I'm Jeremy Elliott, president of the Distilled Spirits Council of Vermont, and also president and co-owner of Smugglers Notch Distillery.
So what is the difference between stuff that's brewed and stuff that's distilled?
Well, typically it's the alcohol content. When we distill something, we concentrate the alcohol. So like a typical distilled spirit has a lot more alcohol in it than a beer itself.
It
And that's
has nothing to
brewed.
do, it has nothing to do with wheat versus another byproduct or anything like
It
that.
does not, no.
Because beers can be made out of a whole range of things, as can be distilled spirits.
Yeah, pretty much we can make a distilled spirit out of anything that we can ferment. So if it's
Potatoes to rye.
potatoes to rye to,
But the process is a fermenting process. What's the process with beer?
it's generally the same thing. So what we do is we ferment to a certain alcohol by volume. So typically for distillers, we target between 12 and 16%, and we call that our sort of like our wash. And then we take that, put it into our still, and then we extract the alcohol out of that, leaving the water behind. And that's what concentrates our particular products.
These products like High Noon, that's something that's made in Vermont that you want on the shelves in grocery stores and convenience stores, correct?
Well,
That's ready to drink, right? That's
Yeah, and these are examples I brought some props into of the products I've been working on for a while, for the last 5 years. Welcome to send these around if you guys want to see them. But yeah, Hydrogen is not made in Vermont.
Okay,
But they're an example of a large corporation that
And
has.
that was my question. So if we give shelf space to Vermont or to these kinds of products, canned cocktails or ready to drink, isn't it just a matter of time before the big guys get into that business and flood our shelf space and push the little guys out?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, being in this business for so many years, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people saying, Jeremy, you can't make a vodka, you can't make a bourbon. Because if you think about it, it's all controlled by the large corporations, right? I mean, you can go from wherever, Jack Daniels to wherever, but we have succeeded because consumers want high quality Vermont made products.
Can I just get the High Noon, you can buy in Massachusetts, New York, and Maine and New Hampshire now on the shelf. So we're only asking for what they already do.
Where's that one made?
That's made, I think, in California.
Oh, but I know I thought, are any of those three made in,
No, but you can buy them, in every state. You can buy the two on the outside, you can buy here in Vermont. You can't, I don't think you can buy that here.
I'm not sure, but I would like just to address that question again about the shelf space issue with the.
Yeah, it's a big issue.
Yeah, so, so this has been part of our plan for the last 5 years, right? RTDs have been saying they've been popular. What I've learned is that companies like myself are not large enough to create a category. And I can use a prime example. I launched a wheat whiskey 7 years ago. Wonderful, wonderful wheat whiskey, right? One of the top whiskeys in the US. It was called Litigation Wheat Whiskey. And no matter how good it was, I wasn't large enough to put the marketing dollars in there to tell everybody what a wheat whiskey was. So it wasn't large enough to create
Are
the
you saying
category.
wheat?
Wheat whiskey.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I heard weak whiskey for a while.
No,
Okay.
wheat whiskey.
Okay, got it.
So,
however, a weak whiskey might.
so we really need these companies like High Noon to create the category for us, right? So they set the stage for us to come in and make a local product that our consumers want. And so, yeah, every day I compete against all those big guys, Grey Goose, we all do. Yet we're all doing well in Vermont as customers and
Are
consumers.
you selling presently in the surrounding states? Can you?
Is my company?
Yeah.
Yes.
These canned cocktails, they're on the shelves in other states around us. Are Vermont products on the other shelves? On those shelves, or are you just in the 802 stores here? Or not anywhere? Where are you?
For the RTDs itself, I haven't launched yet because I'm waiting for this legislation to go through. Now, I have I'm ready to launch. For me, it's a little nuanced. It's really the deposit on the can. It's right now it's 15-cent deposit for the liquor stores. It's 5 cents. So the only reason I haven't canned it is because I'm just waiting to see what happens.
But are other ready-to-drink products that are made in Vermont, are they being sold nationally presently?
I think I'm the very first company that is this close to launching a ready-to-drink cocktail.
Oh, we were told there are two that are, or I'm sure we heard there are two companies doing this already.
Black Flannel has.
Yeah, Black Flannel and Silo, I thought.
Yep, they are making them in smaller quantities, and I believe they're selling right to their retail stores, so they're not on the 802 liquor shelves yet.
Okay, so this is.
So is there any Vermont company that's selling nationally? And is there any prohibition against that for them? Canned cocktail, making it here, putting it in a New Hampshire grocery store?
There's not, no. So I know myself, I've had conversations with my distributors along the Eastern Seaboard, and they're ready to take my product as soon as I get it ready.
Can I move Dan in? Because I know,
Whatever
and
you want.
I think
We
both of,
interrupted before you started the presentation.
I think both of these two would be happy to show up on Zoom and
And come back, but I just want to make sure Jeremy has said everything he wants to say to us. What else did you want us to know?
Perfect. Yeah, there's 3 things I want you guys to go away with.
Good.
That's what we like.
Yes. First is that this.
We don't like Senator investment money.
So just three takeaways really. That H730 is good for our economy, right? It's good for the distilled spirits. I have 21 folks working for me now for tasting rooms spread around Vermont. It's good for tourism, right? It's good for the economy. Second is that this similar legislation that was passed in 2008 that let the brewers grow, we want the same opportunity because 14 years later, our industry is so young and you guys have helped shape this industry so much. We want the same opportunity to grow and we think it will just benefit more Vermont, right? We get lots of tourists coming through. And the third thing is that we are ready to launch in July if this goes through. So I want to make sure that this is not there's a theory that will people launch, will they won't launch? Smugglers Not Distillery is ready to launch. So,
but it's not, it doesn't pencil out if you have to sell through the liquor stores, right?
I still will probably launch, although I'm going from 80 stores to 1,000 stores, right? It's the points of distribution that really will help us grow.
On the other hand, you have an outlet now. I mean, if we market it and improve the 802 stores, they do exist as a market. They are not very well marketed, I don't think necessarily. They could be much better marketed. we could drive people anywhere to get the product itself.
Yeah,
Drive people to it.
I just know that when people are out and about and consumers are looking for just that, they don't want to drive any farther, they're at the grocery store, we're gonna lose a lot of sales.
Many are co-located by grocery stores.
True. I just know that the ease is gonna be to help us grow.
In the essence of time, may I ask one short question
Yes.
that you can either answer yes or no, or you can write us a note afterwards. Would we be better off if we got rid of the control store model entirely?
Oh, you start with a little question.
Well, it's an issue with this legislation. It does raise some questions about where are we going with privatization and should we be more intentional about it or not?
So, in my opinion, no. Because the Vermont liquor control has really helped shape this entire industry. They've been really good proponents for us.
Yeah.
What I do think is happening though is in the surrounding control states, notably New Hampshire, Maine, they've already made this change, right? So ready to drink cocktails in these control states have already been able to be sold by wine and beer distributors. 7 out of the 17 control states have initiated this same legislation in the last 3 or 4 years. And so those distillers are sort of getting help, right? We're asking for the same help that all the other control states are getting now.
Great, thank you. I don't want to take more time.
If I can get Dan in the chair for.
I quickly want to get Jeremy's reaction to a sense I'm getting, which is, I mean, if you drink one of these and you think, I'm just drinking like a glass of wine, you're not. You're drinking potentially 2 or more glasses of wine. This is 100 calories and 5% alcohol. This is probably someone making a potentially better choice in terms of not better than wine, but better than pouring themselves a vodka soda and like going on a picnic. I mean, this is actually, from a health perspective, something that's lower calorie and lower alcohol by volume than a lot of things people think they're drinking that are like ready for travel.
True, and these are controlled servings, right? This is 5%, and if you see the trend, this trend has gone around lower alcohol.
Yeah,
In the
hard
cocktails.
seltzers.
And right now, since COVID, you can go to any restaurant and get, take your cocktail home.
Right, exactly,
And
exactly.
you don't know exactly what the measures
Right,
are.
how much.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Dan Snyder. I'm here representing the Vermont Cider Association as well as Stowe Cider, where I'm the general manager. Would you like to start out with questions? Or you want me to jump right in?
Just present.
Sure.
And Dan, what's your last name again?
Snyder, SNYDER.
Oh, not SCHNER.
Nope, simplified. Thank you, Ellis Island. So jumping right in, I think Senator Westman did a nice job speaking briefly to it. There's a pretty large difference between the way our industry, the cider industry, the consumers of our products, and then the state look at cider, particularly around the alcohol percentage and how it's served. So recently, as Senator Westman spoke to, with changes to Title VII, we've been grouped into essentially a smaller pour size at festivals and events, limiting how much product consumers can enjoy at those happenings. Mainly because we're grouped in with finest beverage,
Right.
which is typically of a ABV range of around 12 to 14%. Hard cider typically ferments between 6 and 7%. Something, and oftentimes below that, even around 5, which is more typical of that, of the alcohol percentages of beer. So with that, there's a building confusion, I think, between the DLL, our regulatory body, as well as the consumer and the industry. And we're hoping to clarify that by submitting a definition for cider. That definition we hope to lie within finest beverage because we are a fermented fruit product, which essentially is how finest beverage is defined, but we're looking to be a lower ABV offset of that, further defining cider as a beverage under 7%, primarily made from apples and pears. With that, building out legislation or further information that defines how much can be enjoyed at a festival event, something similar to that of beer and a simple ABV range, which makes perfect common sense to us, as well as giving us tax parity with beer, 26.5 cents, in the lower range, 55 in the higher.
So there's a twofold purpose to the bill, to lower the tax rate and also to allow for greater consumption at certain festivals.
Sure, essentially, in one short word, parity with beer.
Got it.
Isn't it true that the reason why spirits are taxed at higher rates or wine is taxed at higher rate than beer is because of the alcohol contents and the disincentive it produces in people questioning their consumption? That's the only.
That's that's our general consensus. I don't know the long history of that, and that's where our confusion has been. If there's this large gap of ABV range versus taxation between 0.2% alcohol to 16% alcohol that is wine, why aren't we not splitting that up? And when we have our industry cider that typically is in the lower range, why are we like that of a product that's consumed much differently, generally in 6-ounce pours versus 12 to 16-ounce pours like cider?
So why? So if there's a range of the alcohol content, are we going to be still in no man's land where high content cider is taxed at one rate and low, or you just suggested every cider, regardless of alcohol content, be at the lower rate?
No, we're asking for a high and a low, and being put into, again, a subcategory of finest beverage where cider in a low ABV would be below 7%, and then a high ABV would be above 7%. Similar to the structure of how malt beverage is now. Most cider, again, naturally ferments between 6 and 7% alcohol, and we've been paying a 55-cent tax per gallon for as long as I know, so it's not going to be strenuous for.
Are you saying that beer presently is taxed at different rates depending upon its alcohol volume?
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Our higher alcohol
And
based beers.
and this would exactly track the way beer is done with the alcohol.
Right, the higher the alcohol content, the higher the tax.
Correct.
It seems
It's
fair.
one of the few simplistic aspects of the DLL laws.
So talk about events.
Sure. And so I think we started out there, but
One minute.
yes.
Yeah, we need to go.
1 minute. So, coming back to events, recent Title VII adjustments made it so, consumers could have up to 32 ounces of beer at a festival event. Finest beverage is been shrunk down to 15 ounces. Cider is classified in that realm of finest beverage, even though, again, our ABVs are similar to that of beer. It's very confusing to consumers. It's even more confusing to festival organizers and the industry. It just doesn't make sense why something in the same ABV range would be poured in 1 ounce shots, essentially.
Okay, thank you, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm surprised we haven't done this.
Well, thank you so
I
much.
tried to meet your time limits.
You did very well. So
And
why,
if you would like them to speak again or anything,
we know where to find.
So
Yes.
Richie, this is all in S216.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You want your camera?